Welcome to our webinar presented by ROI, an internal communications in an employee engagement agency. Today's webinar is hosted by the Pacific Plains region of the International Association of Business Communicators. I'm Bill Spaniel, ABC, and a former board member of IABC Pacific Plains, which covers much of the Western United States and parts of the Northern Midwest. The webinar will focus on the latest insights and trends in corporate internal communications, including the emergence of generative artificial intelligence. We will open the webinar for questions and comments after the formal presentation is completed. In the meantime, please use the chat function found at the bottom of your screen. This presentation is being recorded and will be available in about a week or so on ROI's website and the Pacific Plains region's website. And now I'd like to turn this webinar over to our ROI presenters, who will introduce themselves.
Thanks, Bill. Hi, everybody. I'm Janice Smith-Collins, and I'm a Senior Vice President and Account Director here at ROI Communication. I'm really happy to be here with you today. I am a longtime internal comms practitioner and IABC member, and we're thrilled to share some insights with you today and hopefully have a good discussion. I'll let my colleague Liz say hi, and then we'll get started.
Hi, everyone. I am Liz Hutchison-Tapp, and I am Vice President of Digital Strategy and an Account Manager here at ROI. I have been with the agency for about 7 years, and I'm also a longtime internal and external communications practitioner. So we are very excited to be here talking to you today. So I will now hand it back to Janice to share the insights from our most recent benchmark report.
Great. Thanks, Liz. So as you know from the title of our webinar, we're going to talk today about insights and trends, as well as AI, which I know everybody is excited to hear more about. But I do just want to, before we get started, emphasize again, as Bill said, that we welcome your questions and comments throughout the presentation. So don't hesitate to put those in the chat. We will address some of them if we can during the presentation, and we'll also have time at the end to talk a bit more. So with that, I will get started. To begin, I thought I would share just a little bit about ROI communication. In case you aren't already familiar with us, I'll just share a little bit. So ROI is an internal communication and employee engagement agency. We have employees located across North America, and we were founded in 2001. So we've been around for about 21 plus years. Our anniversary is coming up this fall. But we help companies achieve their greatest success through authentic communication and engagement. And in 2021, we became an employee-owned company, which was a pretty exciting change for us. The work we do is focused on helping clients address things like this: strategy, things that are related to vision, mission, and values, digital transformation, org changes, and crisis management, challenges that are related to people, including workforce planning, total rewards, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and challenges that are related to process, including technology implementation, workplace safety, and functional operations. We approach these efforts by focusing on these 3 areas. First, change enablement, which is about shifting mindsets to help organizations continuously innovate, remove barriers, and build an agile workforce that's ready for the future. We also focus on communication strategy and execution, which is about driving engagement, aligning, informing, and engaging employees to help companies to achieve their vision and goals. And communication ecosystems, which are those processes that really help the communications function run. It's about optimizing experiences and putting the right process, channels, resources, technology, and capabilities all in place to make holistic communication happen. So taking a look at the specific capabilities that ROI brings to the table, we've grouped them into a few different areas. First is research and analysis, which is all about audits and best practices, communication measurement. Second is strategic counsel, which is strategic planning, executive comms, org design, communication and digital technology. And then creative delivery and execution, which is about messaging and writing, storytelling, as well as training and events, and also creative design. Here's a look at some of the organizations we have the pleasure of working with. As you can see, our clients come from all kinds of different industries, including tech, retail, energy, bioscience, finance, manufacturing, consumer packaged goods, you name it. We have a lot of different kinds of clients, but the common theme is really the nature of our work, which is focused on internal comms and employee engagement. So with that brief introduction out of the way, let's move into talking about some insights and trends that we're seeing. And we'll start that discussion with talking a bit about the ROI benchmark report. The ROI benchmark report is a survey that provides a comprehensive look at the state of employee communication at leading companies. Our mission with the report is to help communication professionals compare their efforts against industry leaders and be inspired by what's possible for the future of communication and engagement. Nearly 100 leaders responsible for employee communication at large public and private companies participated in the survey, and 3/4 of the participants have global locations, with about half having 10,000 or more employees. So prior to 2022, the last benchmark report was conducted in 2019. And the survey for the most recent report, the 2022 report, was conducted in October of last year. So this little timeline gives you a high-level overview of just some of what has been happening since we did our last benchmark survey. Needless to say, there's been lots of change in the world affecting the workplace and employees in a pretty big way. And it's not stopping as we head into 2023. So as we start the review of some of the insights from our report, just keep in mind that they were gathered in late 2022. Many of the insights still have held true, but it's been a dynamic year so far. And in many cases, we've seen things evolve in different ways than maybe we would have expected. So we'll take a look at the insights that we saw in the survey and also talk about how they've evolved over time and some of the trends that we're seeing. We're going to focus on 3 main areas: employee experience, communication channels, and the internal comms function. So starting with employee experience, let's look first at some of the challenges that were identified in the benchmark findings around this area. No surprise, burnout was identified as a top challenge when it comes to employee experience, and it's a pretty serious one. In addition to the stat you see here from our survey respondents, here's a little bit more from Gallup about why this is such a serious concern. Their research says that employees who frequently experience burnout at work are 2.6 times as likely to leave their current employer, half as likely to discuss how to approach performance goals with their manager, and 13% less confident in their performance. So pretty serious stuff. And I think the other thing to keep in mind here is that burnout, while it's experienced by individuals, when it comes to organization, when you see burnout amongst individuals, it's probably an indicator that there is something bigger going on at that organization, really indicating that there needs to be some kind of systematic change to really make a meaningful difference. So the next area we're going to look at when it comes to challenges is around organizational change. 44% of our respondents in the survey said that this is one of their biggest challenge areas. I think we'd all agree that this insight is definitely one that has held true for 2023 so far, and I expect that it'll continue as we head into the future. Our survey respondents also said that they expected 2023 to be another tumultuous year. And I think it's safe to say that that prediction is pretty much holding true for many companies. Some of the top areas communicators were expecting to focus on to help employees through that tumult were engagement and retention and employee well-being. Some of the ways we help our clients to address some of these challenges and taking care of their employees are making sure they have a listening strategy in place to understand what employee needs are, creating meaningful experiences that help employees feel appreciated and satisfy their need for connection and community, and also thinking about captivating multi-layered experiences. For example, a lot of companies have company all-team meetings that usually consist of Zoom presentations and typical talking points, but really looking at how to amp up these events to include interactive, participative elements such as polling, giveaways, group discussions, local on-site recognition and experiences can really be a game changer. So now we're going to hone in on some of the top initiatives that survey respondents said that they were planning to focus on in 2023. These were the top 3 areas that they highlighted: company culture, values, and behavior, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and employee wellness. So from our perspective, we've seen some of these initiatives continue to be top priorities for our clients, but the environment in 2023 has also created some shifts. For example, in 2022, we saw many clients focused on company culture and values. They were focused on differentiating themselves as employers of choice, reminding employees of what they stood for in terms of their values, and really reinforcing what they were about. But as we moved into 2023, something got in the way of this, and that was organizational change, belt tightening, and in many cases, we saw layoffs. So from our perspective, many of these efforts around values and culture, which are critically important, have been delayed somewhat in 2023. And hopefully we'll be returning to them in the last part of the year and heading into 2024, because I think we all agree that those are just foundationally important elements to employee engagement. The next area, diversity, equity, and inclusion, heading into 2023, in the past few years, we saw significant investment in this area. And I think many expected that that was going to continue heading into 2023. However, for some of the same reasons I just mentioned, as we moved into 2023, budgets were being scrutinized, and as a result, DE&I programming was often reduced at many organizations. There's also been some social and political backlash around DEI, which may be influencing some companies to make a more cautious, conservative approach when it comes to DE&I. So based on this, we've been helping a number of our clients to build a business case for DE&I, honing in on the value it brings for employee attraction, retention, engagement, succession, and not to mention business innovation and financial performance. For instance, a recent McKinsey study showed us that diverse organizations outperform their competitors by 36%. Last but not least is employee wellness. Employee wellness did seem to persevere in many cases as a key initiative, perhaps based on the continued recognition of the unique needs of employees, but efforts to engage them in hybrid environments and also still feeling the after effects of the pandemic, including stress and burnout, were still very present. So in many cases, we've seen employee wellness efforts also delayed as organizational changes took precedence. So taking a closer look at some of the initiatives that weren't on the to-do list, but definitely came to the forefront in 2023, we've honed in on a few different areas. First of all, I mentioned it earlier, layoffs. In 2023 so far, nearly 194,000 US employees have lost their jobs, with more than 150 major layoff actions so far this year. This data is according to the Forbes layoff tracker. And, we've seen it across so many different industries, tech, banks, media, manufacturing. It's just been really, really a huge trend. For context, in 2022, there was about 152,000 layoffs for the entire year. So we're significantly ahead of that already. And, keep in mind that those layoffs that did happen in 2022 really happened at the very end of the year for the most part, in November and December. So, we've all, as internal communicators, been working through the communications related to these announcements, not to mention regrouping for more than 6 months. So that has been taking up a lot of our time. However, I will say there is a bright spot in this, and that is that job cuts hit a 7-month low in June of this year. So hopefully this trend is starting to diminish. Change management, which goes hand in hand with those layoffs, is, of course, been an initiative that many of us have been focused on, restructuring, reorganization, and in some cases, increased mergers and acquisitions. Another interesting change I want to point out that I discovered is that we're seeing more and more company relocation. According to the SEC, corporate relocation has been at its highest rate since 2017. Almost 1 in 12 corporations moved their headquarters in the last year. So even in our hybrid environment, these relocations can be pretty big change stressors that can be important to help our employees navigate so that we can retain them and keep them with us. And then, of course, last but not least, tighter budgets. I mentioned that earlier, but that really has been a reality for many of us as organizations were preparing for an anticipated recession. And communicating about those tighter budgets is an initiative in itself, not to mention the effect that it has on other initiatives that you may have had planned. So moving on to the next area, we're going to focus on communication channels. Not surprisingly, our respondents reported that they're using a wide variety of platforms for intranets, social collaboration, email, newsletters, digital signage, meetings, events, employee feedback, editorial calendars, and dashboards. There's a lot out there. But what the data did show us were a couple of interesting shifts. First, when it comes to email, the data in 2022 was showing a marked shift toward the use of marketing type newsletters. So about half of our respondents use an email platform to send newsletters that is not native to Outlook or Gmail, despite it costing a bit more. And second is on intranets. While 58% of the respondents in our survey said they use SharePoint as a platform, there's a growing trend of out-of-the-box intranet solutions, which offer integrations with other technologies and increasingly better mobile experience. So with all those channels out there, not to mention the variety of messages that have been coming at employees from a lot of different stakeholders, it's pretty noisy out there. 50% of respondents identified channel noise as one of the biggest challenges their organizations are facing. It's getting harder and harder to tackle that to-do list as channel noise prevents messages from getting across. People are confused about where they should find information, how to share it. It can be really difficult to overcome. So one of the things that we've been recommending and seeing our clients do is really focus on assessing their current channels to adopt a more employee-centric design approach, adding a listening strategy, analyzing your audience and your channels really can help uncover some root causes and create a better path forward when it comes to focusing on the right channel, right place, right time. Pardon me. I'm gonna take a little drink of water. A lot of talking here. So now I want to highlight a couple of continuing trends that are related to our communications channels. We've got a lot of channel noise out there. The work environment is shifting. And so a couple of things that we're seeing happen that are related to investing in digital communication infrastructure to better connect people. As you can see here, 56% of folks were really focused on hybrid and remote workers and how they connect with them better. And 55% were really focused on mobile devices and how to reach these people. With more and more people working from home, businesses just can't create the same level of buzz as when they had people coming into the office for all hands meetings or events, those types of things. So we're seeing more creative solutions to really reach people and think about how to connect with them. It's also important to keep in mind that Gen Z is on its way. It's on pace to make up 27% of the workforce by 2025. And this generation is more likely than their older colleagues to communicate with images and video across multiple screens. So the landscape is really changing, and thinking about that is certainly something that we see continuing as a top of mind trend. Going hand in hand with that is the move to invest more heavily in digital going hand in hand with that move to digital communication is this trend, data analytics. 50% of the communicators that we surveyed said they would be focused on increased communication metrics, which is essential to evaluating the current state, recognizing which of your channels is working best for which audience and where there might be gaps. We've helped several of our clients revamp their channel strategies in the past year and agree that this will continue to be a trend going forward. With the proliferation of tools and technologies out there, there's really a need for a company to invest in a channel strategy to make sure that they're using each of those tools optimally and really benefiting employees. Last but not least, when it comes to channels, I have to mention ROI's favorite communication channel, and that's managers. In every benchmark study that we've done for the past 10 or so years, this has emerged as a really important opportunity that isn't fully leveraged. When you look at who has the biggest leverage to delivering on the company's employee value proposition, it's managers. Despite this, only 49% of our respondents have a strategy in place for communicating with people managers. Doing this will allow you to leverage an often untapped yet powerful communication channel and give those managers the skills and tools they need to be great communicators. Even with lots of new technology, digital signage, mobile apps, that our respondents highlighted, the ability to connect to team leaders is a big need, but also a gap. We think it's really important to think about managers and investing in communication support for them, as well as technology, and thinking about how these two things can work in harmony to really reach your frontline employees. So the last area that I'd like to focus on for my area of this discussion and of the benchmark report is the internal communications function. Here's a couple of key highlights from what we have seen from the survey. The first thing I'd like to highlight is about reporting relationships. So internal communications, where internal communications is changing where it reports to. Only 65% of the functions were reporting to corporate comms or HR versus 89% 5 years ago. Marketing is growing as a home for internal communications teams, which has both positive and negative ramifications. For example, you could end up being left out of the marketing efforts, or on the other hand, there could really be some benefits from learning from the campaigns that a marketing organization may have. The other couple of categories to note there are that other category, as well as the one or more function categories. So this may indicate that there is an increasingly diverse interest from different stakeholders within the company in internal communication and employee engagement. So more folks are interested in the kind of work that we're doing and the impact that it can have. And the last kind of notable point I'd like to highlight here is about resources and responsibilities. I think this is something that probably many of us can relate to, but our survey showed that 82% of our respondents expected more responsibilities. At the same time, 75% expected the same or less headcount in budget. So we're really being asked to do more with less. And I'd like to pause now for just a minute. I've been doing lots and lots of talking and would like to invite any questions or comments that folks may have about some of the trends and insights you have or that you're seeing that you might want to share with the group.
Okay, Janice, we actually have a couple of great questions that have popped up in the chat. The first one from Lisa is, what are some programs or ways you have supported recent DE&I efforts?
Okay, so recent DE&I efforts. Well, as I mentioned, of course, one of the most important things that we've really been kind of refocusing on is that business case. But I would say that some of the other key areas that we've been focusing on are really focusing on metrics, figuring out what are the best metrics that an organization can share to show meaningful progress. Working on accountability programs with managers, showing them how they can bring DE&I best practices to their teams on a regular basis. And then also helping with some enablement playbooks for employee resource groups. So a lot of companies have big employee resource groups established for different areas, but really helping those folks who are members of those resource groups with some resources around communication. So playbooks that they can use to share events, share their activities, share their charters, really kind of creating some instructions for them on how to communicate and reach the broader employee audience more independently. As I mentioned, less resources, more responsibilities. So investing in playbooks that can really help some of those groups has been another thing that we've seen.
The next question is from Amy, and it says, would you kindly give examples of other platforms that companies are moving toward and away from SharePoint for intranet? And I can actually go ahead and answer this question.
Yeah, please do, Liz.
Because while SharePoint continues to be the market leader in the intranet space, we are starting to see several third-party out-of-the-box platforms continue to gain market share, notably Simpler, Interact, WorkVivo, and StaffBase are some of the ones that immediately come to mind, along with Unily would be another big one. So it's really become a saturated market for intranet. So it begs the need to really assess what your company's business and system requirements are in order to make sure that you identify the right intranet platform for your organization.
Absolutely.
The next question comes from Ellen, and it is, what are some best practices for communicating with people managers?
So, yeah, I'm glad to hear that question because I talked about how important people managers are. I think that there are a few important things that I would emphasize. First of all, is really understanding kind of the environment in which your people managers are operating. A lot of times managers are pulled in lots of different directions. They have all the responsibilities of the business and are typically leaders in the organization, and then they have to take care of their teams. They have a lot of people asking them to do a lot of different things. So really understanding what their environment is like, what their work day is like, what they have time for, can help you to hone your strategy. But figuring out, is it best to meet with them? Is it best to create an intranet portal where they can get the latest and greatest information? It really does vary depending on your organization and kind of where your people managers sit and the kind of employee audience that they have. But I think trying to figure out a way to kind of meet them where they are and make it easy for them is critically important. So it varies, but I think that's the key to kind of connecting with them is to make it easy for them to consume the support and information that you're sharing.
Great. The next question comes from Craig. How do these surveys differentiate corporate communications from internal communications in terms of reporting structure?
So could you read that one more time, Liz? I want to make sure I answer the question.
Sure. How did these surveys differentiate corporate communications from internal communications in terms of reporting structure?
Okay. So I think, with regard to the survey we conducted with the ROI benchmark survey, we were really focused on communications leaders that sometimes sit in corporate communications, but focused on internal communications. So that really was the focus of our survey. While they might maybe have some other responsibilities, we really were trying to focus on the internal communications aspect of those responsibilities, as that's really where we want to hone in. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure exactly if it does, but hopefully it does. And Liz, if you have another thought there, please don't hesitate to jump in.
I think you covered it. And it looks like I actually missed a question from Kamna, asking, did you see any trends with the use of Viva Engage, Facebook for Work, or other online social tools companies are trying to use for engagement? And I can take this question. And the answer is yes, we are seeing companies leaning into embracing employee social collaboration apps, whether it's through dedicated standalone collaboration apps, such as Teams, or the integrations that are offered from some of the third-party internet platforms. Companies are leaning into that because they are seeing a return on enabling employees to share content, particularly around things like employee recognition, really helping to drive increased engagement rates overall.
Great.
And I think we have the next question is from Cynthia. Do you see much focus on collaboration initiatives within IC?
Collaboration initiatives. I think I haven't seen a lot of that this year. Again, I think because there's been so much organizational change, that has kind of taken precedence. But I think collaboration is definitely becoming more and more of a focus area as we move to the hybrid environment, and really trying to figure out how to kind of break down some of those silos and get people to collaborate, especially possibly after a reorganization or a change is increasingly important. And new dynamics have entered into it as we've moved to new work environments.
Great. And it looks like we have one more question from Andrea. It says, you mentioned noise as a big challenge, but also showed how many more channels people are now using, which contribute to that noise. What thoughts do you have about how to balance these factors?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that it's about taking a hard look at all of those different channels that you may have going on. So really tapping into metrics and trying to get some analytics, perhaps doing a bit of research with your employees to understand what are their preferred channels, what aren't, and really doing like a comprehensive audit to understand how those channels are performing and if they're reaching who you want them to reach at the right time. And in some cases you may find you have a gap. So maybe you want to add a channel, but kind of as a general rule of thumb, if you're going to add a channel, it probably makes sense to get rid of one. Trying to really hone in on what are those few most important channels and which audiences are they going to reach best. So really putting together a channel strategy for knowing which channels are the right ones to reach the people that you want. And really the only way to figure that out is to do some really extensive, research, audits, assessments to really understand the current state and how things are working.
Great. Well, that I think wraps it up for our Q&A section on this segment of the presentation.
Okay, great. Well, I am going to share just one more slide, and then I will turn it over to you, Liz. And that is coming back to this timeline slide that I shared at the beginning. We talked a lot about different trends and insights, and we also talked about when the ROI benchmark report was released and when the survey was conducted, and that was in late 2022 in October. And then something pretty big happened right after that, and that was the introduction of ChatGPT, which came out right around the same time, right just after, actually, in November of that year. So we didn't see as much about AI as we maybe could have if the survey was conducted a bit easier. But I do think that it has really taken over the limelight, and a lot of us are thinking about how we can use this, how it's going to affect us in the internal communications function. And so I want to turn it over to you, Liz, so you can share a bit more about that, and I'll let you take it away.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so now we are going to pivot our focus to the emergence of generative AI. And as Janice just mentioned, when we closed the ROI benchmark survey window last October, we literally shuttered it on the eve of what perhaps can be defined as a paradigm shift within the world of communications. Because when ChatGPT launched in November, it unveiled a truly transformative technology, which was effectively a chatbot built on top of OpenAI's family of large language models. And to put it simply, it created a human interface that enabled the average consumer, such as yourself or me, to easily access machine learning models that were capable of generating really complex forms of data and information. And what's really impressive and astonishing is the fact that once it launched, it took 2 months to reach 100 million app downloads. And to put that into perspective, sorry, I'm having a little bit of an issue with my slides. See if I can fix that. To put that into perspective, it took TikTok 9 months to reach that milestone, and it took Instagram 2.5 years and Twitter 5.5 years to get to 100 million app downloads. And most apps never reach that milestone. And within the first 2 months of ChatGPT launching, it really exploded the generative AI app landscape. In January of 2023, again, 2 months after it had launched, this is what the Gen AI app landscape looked like. And just 30 days later, in February, this is what it looked like. And I think, this is, and today it's even bigger and broader than it was before. And I think this is really important to highlight because it demonstrates how the pace of technology adoption has really accelerated in recent years. So moving on to the next slide, I think by now, most everyone on this call, at least to some extent, is somewhat familiar with how you can use generative AI, particularly in the world of communications. You can use it for content creation, whether that's drafting emails or writing feature stories. You can use it to brainstorm, get your creative juices flowing. You can use it to summarize meeting notes, language translation, workflow automation, really reducing the amount of time you're spending on administrative tasks, such as managing editorial calendars and scheduling meetings. And because of the advances in natural language processing, Gen AI now has the ability to really accurately conduct sentiment analysis and feedback. So you can really measure in real time and do trend and topical analysis on all the content that you're pushing out internally. So the opportunities to really leverage Gen AI are there. And if you're still a little bit hesitant to dive in, we recently held an ROI Tech Talk where we polled everyone who attended, and we found that 50% had dabbled in it, were starting to get comfortable with it, and the other 50% were holding back. They weren't quite sure if they wanted to engage. And we're here to say that it's worth learning about and understanding so that you can find ways to make yourself and your teams more efficient. But if you need a little bit of help in that area, there are several different learning resources available to you in the market from companies like Google, Microsoft, and LinkedIn. ROI also has an AI resource hub that you can find by visiting roico.com. And I do want to take a moment and pause and talk about the fact that as communicators, we've been asked to adapt how we operate many times in the past. When social media began to emerge in the early 2000s, we had to adjust how we connected with our target audiences. We had to develop social media policies and guidelines for our organizations, and we had to adapt to the real-time consumption of and feedback on the news and information that we were distributing on those platforms, which was something that our profession had never really experienced prior to that. But I think the key difference between the emergence of social media and the tidal wave that is generative AI is the speed at which we have needed to adapt is now much faster, because the pace of technology adoption is looks more like a hockey stick than a long adoption arc. So it really highlights the importance to maintain an agile mindset, so we can lean in and quickly learn about generative AI and understand the various implications. That will empower us to develop a clear point of view, which we can then apply to policies and guidelines that we're developing for our organizations, and help us determine how and where we're choosing to integrate Gen AI apps into our landscape, which should be done in partnership with your IT, data engineering, and legal teams. But I think most importantly, it's important to have an agile mindset, because these language models will become a foundational part of every human interaction app that employees use. The Gen AI integrations are coming to all of the third-party platforms that may or will be a part of your internal communications ecosystem. Microsoft Copilot is in beta testing now and is theoretically launching this fall. It was launched to 600 global clients last month. Simpler, staff-based, Zoom, First Up, all of these platforms are now integrating and beta testing various generative AI capabilities into their products. The type and extent of these capabilities really varies by the individual platform, but at a high level, they include language translation, automated governance, predictive analytics. And what these capabilities do is, if you're looking at a decentralized content management model for how you contribute content to your intranet, it enables non-communicator contributors to draft and revise and summarize their content in a way that makes it better. It's going to make it more accurate, it's going to make it easier to find, and it's going to make it easier for employees to consume it. And I think one of the most exciting capabilities of these applications is the ability for generative AI to surface the most recent and accurate information that employees are looking for. Can you imagine having employees go to your intranet, open up the company-wide chatbot, type in what they need, and have the right content that is up to date and completely accurate be surfaced for them? I mean, from my personal experience, I think that would be pretty game-changing. So it's pretty exciting. But I think the end point of this is really take the time to understand how Gen AI applications are being integrated into all of the third-party platforms within your IC ecosystem, because that's going to help you optimize your team's efforts and ultimately help you achieve your strategic objectives. And if you need a little help, ROI Communication can do that. We have got a lot of experience coming in and helping companies conduct audits and assessments on their digital internal comms ecosystem. And we can also come in and help you design your AI policies and then translate them into guidelines that actually apply. And while the possibilities of generative AI are pretty exciting, it's also important to remember that these applications are not always 100% accurate, private, or unbiased. and they may infringe upon copyrights or other proprietary information. So it's really important for you to understand how these apps work and how you need to adjust them or set them up in a way that you will be able to leverage their capabilities without compromising your company's proprietary information. So I know that was a whirlwind walkthrough of all things generative AI, but hopefully you found it valuable. And now I will open it up to any questions.
Liz, I could share one comment that came in that I think that corresponds to what you just said. It's a comment from Scott, and he shared that before engaging with any AI app, it's a good idea to get an opinion go-ahead from your legal or risk and compliance function to ensure use will not violate any customer or client contracts from a data security standpoint.
Absolutely, you're 100% right. And I think that's why it's important for communicators to really dive in and understand how Gen AI works and to have a point of view so that you can come to the table with your legal and IT groups to help develop what the Gen AI policy is going to be, because I completely agree. I also will say that a lot of companies came out and immediately banned the consumer-facing version of ChatGPT, and there are business versions of that application, but also a lot of companies are designing applications in-house so that they can have more control while still leveraging the capabilities. But completely agree, you definitely need to do it in partnership with your IT and legal teams. Okay, and it looks like we have another question. Do you have any examples of sources for examples of AI policies and best practices? Best practices, it's still fairly new, so we're still compiling those. I think, best practices in terms of how you develop the policy is really looking at is really talking to your legal teams and talking to your IT teams to make sure that anything that is implemented is going to protect company data. And then I also think really taking the time to audit any third-party platforms that are within your ecosystem so that you can understand what those implications are as well. And I think I will end on a wonderful comment that Hamna just made. As internal communicators and influencers, it seems we all have the opportunity to influence our leaders and organizations to approach AI responsibly, but with curiosity rather than fear. I think that is very well said. It can't be escaped, and we don't want to be behind the curve. I could not agree with you more, so thank you for that. Okay, and now I will hand it off to Janet to wrap us up.
Great. Thank you, Liz. And thank you, everybody, for your questions. I knew we threw a lot of information at you to digest. Hopefully some of it was helpful. I will just wrap up real quickly with a little bit of a summary of an offering that ROI has, and that is the ROI Partner Group. In some ways, it can be sort of a continuation of what we're doing here today, but really offer some great opportunities for networking. It's an annual membership that provides you with strategic guidance. You get regular strategic counsel from an advisor from ROI, a 4-hour strategic planning session that you can have with your team. Again, the networking and best practice sharing that we have here. And then diagnostic tools like our Partner Group Pulses, which will allow you to ask others in the field and other internal communicators about what they're working on and some of the solutions they're taking. So more on that if you're interested. And with that, I will turn it back over to Bill to wrap us up.
Thank you, Liz and Janice, for a great presentation. And thanks to our participants for attending today's program. I'd like to mention that this webinar and other professional development opportunities are a benefit of joining the International Association of Business Communicators. Other benefits include participation in shared interest groups and masterclasses in various aspects of corporate communications. And don't forget our World Conference, which will be held in June 2024 in Chicago. If you are not a member of IABC, please go to iabc.com to learn more about how IABC can help you advance in your career. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.